Welcome to Full Speed Ahead. I'm Craig Fuller. I'm joined once again with Kendra Trucker, the CEO of Truckstop. Kendra, you're at TIA. A lot of conversations happening. What is the big sort of theme for TIA this year?
So many themes at TIA this year. And Craig, thanks again for having me join you. Some of the things that we are talking to our customers about, one of the most popular topics is fraud. Lots of conversation happening on how to keep people safe in the industry and make sure that the relationships they're building are really with the people that they want to build those relationships with. So that's really top of mind for a lot of the people that we're talking to here.
So, fraud is the number one topic on people's mind. You guys have spent a lot of investment and energy focusing on creating best practices. And this is ultimately a never ending game. I mean, as you guys implement new solutions, the unfortunately the criminals get smarter. What is the latest trends in terms of fraud? Like, what are you seeing?
So we're seeing a number of trends. On the carrier side, we recently did a survey that says carriers are actually pretty worried about maintaining their reputation because their identities are being stolen. One of the recent trends that we're trying to guide our carriers on is not selling their MCs. This is something that we've seen really tick up in the past couple of months or so where carriers who are not actively driving are selling their active MCs to fraudulent actors. What they don't realize is that even though they might make a quick hit of money, those fraudulent actors are then using those MCs to steal their identity. So, other personal information that they then use to fully impersonate them. So this is something that's been on the rise. It's something that has really ticked up so much in the past few months that we're even talking directly to the FMCSA about what to do about it.
Is there any circumstance that selling your MC makes sense? I mean, I did that when I first started a brokerage years ago. Is I went out and bought an existing MC because I wanted tenure of that MC. But are you suggesting that even when you know the other party is legitimate, that you shouldn't do that?
No, I'm not suggesting that there are definitely legitimate ways to go about selling your MC. What's happening, what we see is that people are selling their MCs for relatively low prices. And when we talked about it with the FMCSA, being able to sell your MC was actually designed more for absorbing a whole company and then changing the contact information over to the new owner. What's happening when there are nefarious actors involved is they purchase the MC, but they don't change any of the personal contact information that's associated with it. So it becomes almost like a paid for identity theft that is really victimizing carriers in particular.
Yeah, especially if you don't know the other party. I think that's where your risk is exponential. Is you meet them online or you meet them through some type of chat room, and all of a sudden things become a problem for you. The risks of doing that. You talked about identity theft being a major issue. This is a relatively new occurring fraud. I mean, it's something that has only been discussed as far as I can recall for the last 2 to 3 years. Before that, it was traditional double brokering scenarios where a carrier would show up, bump the dock, and then accept a fuel advance and never actually deliver the load. We've seen situations like that, but this is a new evol- sort of evolving trend. What exactly is happening?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the contact information and impersonation. So, some of the things that we see through our RMIS product is bad actors coming in and doing simple changes. So, things like changing an email address from it saying, Craig at craigtrucking.com to Craig at craigtrucking.net, and so thereby rerouting information, raycons, et cetera, from a legitimate email address to a bad actor, and then fully intercepting the load itself or payment. So that type of impersonation is something that we really see on the rise right now.
And that's so easy to do because trucking company names sound so familiar. I mean, I remember when I was at US Express, which starts with an X, there was a US E Express. And people would oftentimes get it confused. But the trucking names, particularly when you've not done business with a company, do get pretty confusing in terms of what the email address is. What are you guys doing to help inform and empower brokers and carriers to really deal with this issue.
Yeah. One of the things I think that we agree on across the industry, I was just listening to a panel yesterday where even competitors are coming together to say it is time to do quite a bit of education for particularly smaller carriers and smaller brokers to make sure they understand what's really at risk. So, education, I think, is number one. Number two, this is really important, is across the board, Truckstop and other companies are rolling out things like identity validation. So at Truckstop, what we're doing is making sure that the person who is setting up an account with us is actually the person they say they are. Now, in fairness, we've been doing this for decades, as long as Truckstop has been in business. Part of what we've added is ID verification. So having someone take a selfie of themselves and then uploading their driver's license so we can confirm that there's a real human who actually matches the contact information that they've given us, and that adds a really fantastic layer of protection, particularly for our carrier customers. So that is one of the biggest things, is that even though it can feel like another administrative burden that you might have to deal with, it's really important for our carriers just to protect the businesses that they've built.
Yeah, I think it's an important move. I mean, I've seen social media platforms have rolled that out. Twitter to become verified, or X, as Elon Musk likes to call it, has mandated that as well. If you want to be a part of a verified person, you have to sort of go through that process. So it's not that painful. I got annoyed the first time I got asked to do it because I was like, I didn't know how to do it. But once you've done it once or twice, it really isn't that painful. So, but it's important. I think being a known provider and having someone that you know on the other side of the table is really important. One thing, Kendra, I spent 10 years in payments, and I oftentimes think to the early days of the internet and the credit card industry didn't have any kind of standards. There was nothing, they didn't, now it's called PCI, but the industry and competitors, Discover, MasterCard, Visa, American Express, came together and created something called the PCI standard, which is now governs really credit cards on the internet. Do you think you'll see an opportunity for Truckstop and DAT and others to come together to sort of solve these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, when I said yesterday I was listening to a panel where we were on the panel, DAT was on the panel, an insurance provider was on the panel. And even though we have restrictions on what we can actually share with each other for a whole host of reasons, there's a lot that we can do to educate government bodies. So we are both actively working with the FBI to actually catch some of the nefarious actors, which we know are organized crime rings, right? So we're working pretty closely with them. We spend time with the FMCSA in order to educate them on what we're seeing. So that way, as they make changes, especially as they think about how to use MCs and authorities, that they're well informed, right, from our point of view. We are working together with TIA on the brokerage side in order to make sure we are educating them and coming up with collaborative ways to capture information about the fraudulent actors that we see, right? So we at Truckstop are looking for third parties that we can work with in order to help capture that information across the industry. And I think there's a lot of collaboration that's happening around that.
I think that's important. I have not as much confidence, it sounds like, as you do in law enforcement. I just don't think law enforcement takes these issues very serious. It is going to take the industry getting together, and really, Truck Stop is a leader in that. I mean, you guys are an important part of the freight ecosystem, and really, it takes your initiative and others' willingness to work together to sort of solve this issue. So that's encouraging. So, Kendra, another major topic beyond fraud is really the market. This has been a pretty abysmal couple years. I have coined it the Great Freight Recession. We're in the third year of the Great Freight Recession, going into the third year. What are you hearing on the ground from brokers and carriers? What is the sort of mood right now?
So it's really interesting. I purposefully attend conferences like these in order to keep my ear to the ground and understand what's the sentiment. I will tell you, the meetings and conferences that I went to in the early part of this year, there was this tinge of optimism that I was hearing from some of the largest brokers. They were talking about investing and growing their carrier sales rep teams in anticipation of volume that they expected to see an uptick in over the course of the year. And I thought that was really interesting because I myself hadn't quite seen it in the data. Then, as you move through, I think this first quarter, and I was having dinner with a few broker customers last night, and I think the general sentiment is this year may not have the uptick that others were forecasting at the start. Now, I think everybody still agrees that we've seen the bottom, and I think the question is how long will we persist in this state? There's not, I guess I would say, resolve to get through the 2024 year, but the optimism has tamped down just a little bit.
Now, I was one of those that actually thought we were coming back in January because we did see it. We saw strengthening in January, and this is the second year we saw it. Last year we saw the same thing: is that January performed better than December did, and then we saw it this year as well. And it always sort of felt like that signal felt like things were coming back, but February and March and early April has told us different. So I still am optimistic for the second half. It sounds like you're cautious on putting any sort of enthusiasm on the second half. At this point, I'm just sort of tired of talking about the the sort of abysmal period that is this freight recession and want to move on. But unfortunately, I don't get to dictate the circumstances of the market.
Agreed, agreed. And we've got, data from the carrier side. We just recently did a survey of a few thousand carriers who say, they've increased the number of broker relationships that they've had over the past, actually within 2024 already compared to 2023. So I think it's gone up 13%. So they are definitely trying to get more freight. I think the number of unpaid deadhead mileage has gone up almost 20%. So on the carrier side, I know that they're feeling it a lot as well too. I will tell you though, we still think there's still optimism in the number of carriers that are still in the market. So if you look at where the carrier counts are now as end of March 2024 versus where we were pre-pandemic, there's still 94,000 more carriers. I don't know if you've seen this data, but it's really interesting to see how much the carrier side of the market has expanded and how it continues to stay that way. That on its own suggests optimism, right, in the carrier space that they hang on, um, expecting the market to hopefully come back.
It has been a massive surprise. We've been seeing the same data, and it's a very we're seeing some level of churn, but it's to your point. There's recent actually been some expansion in the market number of carriers. I have a theory that it's the brokerage industry that's really, this is the first major downturn where brokerages have played a significant portion of the market. And frankly, Truckstop and really the digitization that's taking place with all the various digital apps. And it's never been easier to be a carrier to get in the market. And typically, when we have a downturn, what we typically see is that the larger asset carriers get all the freight, and the small SMB, small truckers, don't get much of it. But the brokers seem to be keeping them alive and keep them in the market a lot longer because they're able to at least to, while they may not be profitable, at least to maintain some cash flow. Is your data sharing the same sort of sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. That when you factor in the cost, so everything from fuel costs to insurance costs, inflation, that carriers are regularly not covering all of their expenses. And so they have to be drawing down on cash reserves, right, from 21 and the first part of 22. So we are seeing the same thing. I think across the board, like you're saying, I think we all agree it's surprising uh, how many have continued to stay within the industry. I don't know, I guess my sentiment would be if 2024 continues and looks a lot like 2023, then I think we would be looking at, unfortunately, more failures, right, happening for carrier companies by the end. I'll tell you this too, from that survey I just mentioned, um, we heard that 9%, only 9% of carriers who took the survey said they expected to be out of business within the next 6 months. So it's still, right, a relatively small number that would even forecast that right now.
Yeah, I will say, this is an anecdote stat, not really a scientific stat, but I looked at 2019, the number of bankruptcies we reported on, and we were doing, as many 5 to 10 a week at some point. At one point, we're doing about one every other week. So the amount of stories we did, and we don't report on every small carrier that goes out of business, but when you have anybody over 20 to 50 trucks, typically we're reporting on those. We just haven't seen the level of sort of churn of the industry and capacity, and it suggests that the economy is, if you look at the volume data, the freight economy is actually doing well. It's the fact that we have so many carriers, unfortunately. I guess fortunate for Truckstop and folks that sell services to small carriers, there is a level of sort of optimism there. But it is a challenging market. It's one that certainly is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it really is. It is a remarkable phenomenon. But I appreciate the optimism. Like you said, I am cautious about what it will look like by the time we hit the end of 24. But look, our business was founded to help small truckers find freight and help that freight find them. So we are always rooting for and cheering for the small carrier to be successful. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that the market turns.
Well, Kendra, thank you so much for joining me today, and look forward to seeing what's next for Truckstop.
Great. Craig, thank you so much for having me.